right, well, welcome along to another episode of Sweet Tea and Coffee. And today we have not one, but two, Blake. Two friends of the pod to talk about. One of whom I know really well. We're recording this coming out of Mother's Day. And I'll say I have a pretty fantastic mom.
Yeah.
But she didn't mince words about whether or not she earned a sticker.
Yeah,
now,
the sticker thing is really
it's real.
I get at least 2 or 3 emails a week or comments from friends of the pod who are demanding their stickers. So we're going to have to do something about that.
Well, Mom has been a faithful listener. And when we said that there was a standard for earning a sticker, I immediately got a text message after that episode had released. And she said, your mom has definitely earned her sticker. So big shout out, Karen McDonald, all the way in Flower Mound, Texas. Thanks for being a friend of the pod. If we get stickers, when we get stickers, one's coming to you, Mom.
Yeah.
I love you. All right, another friend of the pod.
We have another friend of the pod. We got an email this week. And so this is a delayed recording. So this actually, when this releases, it would have been like a few weeks ago. But anyway, we've got an email from Maria Marquez, and she talks about how they are, her and her son Isaac Jr. are faithful friends of the pod. They've been friends of the pod since day one, and they're demanding their sticker. So
demanding, or asking nicely, or is it what do we think?
We definitely earned our stickers.
Oh, earned. Okay, there's a lot of that. Yeah, I people are just give them what they want.
I feel like the stickers may not be enough for some of these people.
Give the people what they want.
But yeah, now she did say that Isaac Sr.
He's a reluctant friend of the pod, isn't he?
Yeah, he needs to catch up on some episodes apparently. But yeah,
he's an elder.
He's an elder
here at our church. But he hasn't found time to be a friend of the pod. We may have to talk to him about that a little bit. I don't know if that's acceptable. Well, that's good. Thanks, Maria, for and Isaac Jr. And Isaac Jr., you know, he has been known to talk a little trash when it comes to sports, and particularly he's a Spurs fan, and he comes at my Mavericks and comes at the Red Raiders pretty often. And so he and I have got a little beef. But I'm glad that he's a friend of the pod.
Yeah, despite all that,
he's still a pretty cool dude. Pretty cool dude. All right, well, thanks for giving us your feedback. We've got a fun guest today. We've got Mr. Nathan Jessup in the house, and Nathan is, if you've ever heard about discipleship school here at Fredonia Hill, Nathan went through discipleship school, and God did some really cool things in his life there. We're going to get into that. He is a police officer for Nacogdoches PD, and so I'm sure has all sorts of fun and exciting stories to tell us. But yeah, let's stick around, and we're going to get an interview with Nathan Jessup. Okay, so I said we've got Nathan Jessup in the house with us today, and Nathan, right over behind Blake, I'm kind of looking at the back wall. We need to put this on YouTube if that's going to mean anything to anybody. I prefer to
paint the picture with
words.
Paint
the picture with words. Well, I'm going to fail to do that. But anyway, there's a couch in this room that we're in, and on that couch, there's a leather motorcycle jacket with things written on it.
Yeah, that's the Blue Knights. So I've become a member of the Blue Knights, which is a police officer motorcycle club.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, it's not a gang. It's not a gang. It's a club. It's a bunch of retired law enforcement and active duty law enforcement and some honorary members. So it's a very family oriented club. So definitely a joy to be around.
That's cool.
I'm by far the youngest guy in our group. They're at least twice my age, but I like hanging out with the old guys. They're a lot of fun.
That's right. And that's why you're hanging out with us here today, hanging out with the old guys.
Hey, you know, there's a group of old guys at Fredonia Hill that have been doing a little bit of bike riding as well. And maybe we need some sort of... Shout
out to Dennis Jones, Bill Plunkett, not calling him old, Roger Russell, not calling him old, but...
I mean, Bill tends to rub in his trips quite a bit. So, I mean, every time he comes back, he makes it a point to come into the foyer and just flip through the 100 of pictures and talk about every single one of them.
Oh, we talked about that. Yeah.
Rubs it in quite a bit.
He goes to some pretty amazing...
it's fantastic.
Some awesome
his friend
trips.
Group that he has?
Yeah.
Like, oh man, can you imagine having the same friend group from high school?
It's pretty
every
amazing.
year going on trips. That's pretty incredible.
We got into that in his episode.
Did you? I haven't listened to that one yet.
Yeah. You should.
Well, Nathan is currently binging the podcast because when he realized he was going to be on it, he was like, "Hey, I need to know a few things about it. It's been on my queue, haven't gotten to it," and so he's rapidly becoming a friend of the pod. But now that he's on the pod, I guess he qualifies.
Right.
But okay, so we just jumped in right into your story. You have a motorcycle, great. But how in the world did you get to Nacogdoches? What's your story in arriving in our little town?
Well, just out of college, I actually went to Sam Houston, Eat 'em Up Cats.
Wow, it's bold on a
yeah. So I graduated from Sam Houston. I ended up going back home to Livingston to help take care of my grandma. I started working in dispatch at the Polk County Sheriff's Office for about a year. And ultimately, I was just looking for jobs, have a criminal justice degree, and so I was just trying to find different jobs. At the time, I was in a relationship where somebody was living up here in Nacogdoches, and so I applied for different police departments. I applied for Nacogdoches Police Department, Lufkin, and Houston, and all three of them were accepting me. And ultimately, it was kind of fun because it became almost a rush. It seemed like who was going to hire me first, because ultimately Houston, they didn't really care. They were going to get their people regardless whether it was me or not. But between Lufkin and Nac, they were. Each time that I went to a different interview, they found out the other department was that much further along. So they were like really trying to rush and get me in. So ultimately, Nacogdoches hired me first.
Wow.
And so
now, while you were getting your criminal justice degree, did you know that you wanted to be a police officer? Was that always the end goal, or how did that happen?
I can't tell you when I originally decided I wanted to be a police officer. So I actually started out college as a business major. I had a full scholarship and in business, and I hated it. I dreaded every day. And so I actually failed and lost my scholarship, and had a friend that was doing criminal justice. And I was like, oh, that sounds fun. So started doing that. Actually enjoyed college. And I don't know that if I'd made a decision then that I wanted to be a police officer. It was just kind of like, at some point in time, from the time that I started CJ, maybe it was like a professor or something that I had, but from that point on, it just kind of started dawning on me, like maybe I could be a cop, and that's all I could see myself doing at that point. So that's kind of, I didn't have, a lot of people have that dream, like whenever they're a little kid, like always wanted to be police officers. No, I never thought that I'd be one. I used to make jokes all the time that, if I was ever a cop, I would intentionally drive 5 miles an hour under the speed limit just to see how many people were afraid to pass me.
Is that a thing? We need to know if that's a thing.
Not intentionally for that purpose, but it is a thing that we...
Here's what I want to know. How often am I being messed with when there's a police officer in front or behind, either going a little bit faster or a little bit slower? Always in my mind, I'm wondering, am I being messed with here? What's going on?
The funny thing is, it becomes pretty frustrating for us sometimes, because we'll be trying to get from point A to point B, right? We're just trying to drive like anybody else.
That's right. Just trying to go get my groceries.
Yeah, right. And somebody will get in front of us and they just automatically think we're just watching them. So they'll just go super slow, and we're back there just like, come on. And, I don't normally get road rage unless I'm actually headed to like a call or something that I need to get to, and somebody in front of me is driving just super, super slow. Not even the speed limit, but they're just that nervous that, there's a cop behind me. I better go slow. It's like, no, just drive normal. It's fine.
You can actually be pulled over. You can be pulled over for going too slow.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind as you slam on the brakes and go way too slow.
Yeah.
That's funny. Okay. So graduate from Sam Houston, and then first job is Nacogdoches? Or you said you did dispatch.
Yes, sir. I was a dispatcher at Polk County Sheriff's Office.
Okay.
Did that part-time, and then I took on a full-time position at AmeriCare EMS dispatching for them as well. So it was 911 dispatching, whether it was EMS or for the Sheriff's Department, but I did that for roughly a year. And then in November 2014 is when I made the move up here. I got hired on, and then I went through the academy in January of 15. The academy is about 4 months long, and so actually this month is 7 years.
Wow!
Since I graduated the police academy. So
wow,
yeah.
And now you're into all sorts of fun and interesting things in the department. But talk a little bit about at that point. So you transition here to Nacogdoches.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what's it like starting out in that world?
Well, it's as far as the area is concerned, I grew up East Texas, Livingston's East Texas, so there wasn't a huge transition, in that portion of it. But coming into law enforcement, I didn't know anybody up here in Nacogdoches. I had, a couple of acquaintances from college. They're from high school that went to SFA and that were still kind of lingering around, but I never really associated with them much. So, when I came here, I didn't know anybody except for at the time the relationship I was in. And so, I was just the outsider at the department. Nobody knew anything about me. So unfortunately, I got this stigma on me about being a quote know-it-all, and doing air quotes. Yeah. But and a lot of it was because during I had my criminal justice degree, so I learned a lot there. I'd been a dispatcher, so I had some experience on that level. So when I came in new, it wasn't like I wasn't just run of the mill. Yeah. And I'd done a lot of ride-alongs and stuff throughout the pre-academy, and then I did a lot of ride-alongs. I did ride-alongs when I was down there. So, and I was also a volunteer firefighter for ultimately about 3 years, but at that time it had only been about a year and a half, almost 2. So I had a lot of experience in the area, in the area of work, I guess, and so it just rubbed people that way. And then when I ended up going through the academy, just doing my thing, the academy, the chief came out. One of the most intimidating type interviews was with the chief at the beginning, right before Nacogdoches PD sent me to the academy. He said, "I just want to let you know this is your job. It's your job to go to the academy, so we expect you to do well." So I took it to heart. So I did everything. I memorized all the things I was supposed to do. I studied. Probably the most effort I've ever put into any form of education in my life, and it didn't help the stigma on me because I ended up graduating valedictorian from the academy. So then when I came back to the department, everybody heard all that. Then it's just like, oh, there's Jessup.
You're that guy.
Yeah, I was that guy. And so I had to battle that for a couple of years. And there's some people that would still argue that that's still a true statement about me. But then most people are just like, no, that's not true at all. It's just, I enjoy my job.
So so in that period of time, that's got to be pretty quickly after you move here, fairly quickly, I think. If I'm remembering correct, that you start to get involved here. What brought you to Fredonia Hill? How was it that you interacted here? Because I think that's a pretty cool story.
Yeah. There's a huge history with all that stuff. So I'd actually I grew up in the church, and I'd gotten my family and I got real bad burned by the church. We were bullied by people at the church. We were looked down on a lot because my mom was divorced a couple of times, and so we were that family that was shunned. And it was a big church. I won't point out any names or anything, but it was a big church, and so it was one of those deals that that's just what we felt like things were. So ultimately, I strayed away for years. Right after I graduated college, I ended up going back home, and there was a family friend of ours who I had run into in the store one day, and he was a pastor at the time. Ultimately, fast forward a little bit, he's the one who married us, but he's a pastor at the time, and that was the first introduction, I guess, into church, was starting to go there. Then when I came to NAC, I strayed away again. I think it would have been in 2018, if I remember right. I think it was 2018. Fast forward those few years that I was here, I had this real craving, I guess, for something. There was some different things that were going on in personal life, and I just had this craving for something. I had been studying. I dated a couple girls that were in different denominations. There's a Catholic, Church of Christ, and I kind of branched off and started studying up different things like that. And I remember the first event that I'd done here was a fall festival deal out in the parking lot, and I was part of that doing security.
Yeah. So I mean, detail that. So you're not doing that as part of our church. You're doing that because you get a call that there's job opportunity to do some security for the department. That's what brings you.
That was the
into the parking lot.
First introduction, yes, sir. That was in the parking lot. Was just the just doing an extra job, and I thought it would be fun. You know, I did trunk or treat stuff before, and I always thought it was fun. I love kids, and especially being a police officer, getting to be around kids and just have that interaction is just a lot of fun. So heck yeah. And then I believe it was within a couple of weeks of that time there was a church shooting in Sutherland Springs, and most everybody's real familiar with that, where a guy came from outside and ultimately ended up killing and injuring quite a bit of people in this small church, small town. And that very next Sunday, there was a deal where the church had posted they wanted security. And so at that time, I didn't have a church home here or anything. I was like, oh yeah, I'll get paid to go to church. Yeah. And so that's pretty much what brought me in the doors. And so I started doing security every Sunday in the foyer and just hanging out and just seeing everybody's smiling faces. And I'd still had a little bit of standoffishness to church, mainly because it was another big church. And I had toyed around with some other smaller churches in the area and gotten real close with some people. But I just, I had this image in my mind of what a big church was, and where you're going to have all that judgment and all that, stuff, and all these issues that we had. It was almost like a scar for years of all this, trauma, I guess, if you will, that we experienced growing up. Just kind of came back and just like, I'm going to stand away from here for a little while. But ultimately, just the greetings and everything I got from people at the church just started getting me more into it. And I had a little bit of a rough time at one point with some personal stuff, with the relationship ending, and it was a real tough time. And at that point, I just kind of knew that there was something that needed to happen. And so I just had this big craving for something to fill whatever was going on. And ultimately I'd reached out to try to get involved with something. And I remember a phone call with John James. I was trying to get something more than just Sunday. And I got a phone call with John James. He calls me and he starts talking to me about different things. It was on a Monday. And it was during the summer of 2018, I think. If dates may be wrong, but it's somewhere in there, or 19. He ended up inviting me to the college night, which of course I wasn't in college. So it was just kind of, I'd asked for something. He's like, well, in the summertime, we don't really have like Wednesday nights or anything like that. Or I think there might've been, but at the time I was working night shift, so I wasn't available for it. And there was no Sunday night services. So those are things I was craving, is trying to get something more out of church than just showing up and working security on Sundays. And so, he invited me to that college group, and I remember a couple of people kind of give me some of those looks, and there was somebody that I had ran into, not in a bad way, not in a bad way, but
he can't say that, but
there was somebody that I'd ran into that knew I was a police officer, knew I wasn't a college student, and they ended up whenever I got there, the first look I got from them was just like, what are you doing here? Kind of thing. I was just like, John invited me.
I'm undercover.
Yeah. So no, and that kind of got me, started getting me plugged in, was just those interactions. And so it was really just everybody just being accepting and talking to me and asking questions. And it seemed like there was a lot of people that really wanted to get to know me, not just hear all the cop stories and all that stuff. And so it just kind of pulled me in.
So in a way, you're describing like that. There was obviously, like you mentioned, just trauma and hurt from the experience you and your family had at church, but it was relationship and consistency here of continuing to, and that's not nothing special here. It could have been anywhere, but the point was that you kept interacting with people who seemed genuinely interested in who you were and cared about you, and that over time, that was actually affecting some of those scars and that history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I know that the very first Sunday, in fact, that I worked security, there was it was the Thanksgiving dinner, or it was some potluck, something or another that was going on.
We do a lot of that.
Yeah. It's great. I love food.
Yeah.
But actually, I want to say it was Sheila Cooey. As soon as church was about to end or whatever it was, at some point in time, she invited me to come down. And so the very first people that I sat with were the Cooeys and the Knowles, and I sat down and we had lunch, and that was just some mention of the smiling faces. And even to this day, Sheila will come out of her way just to make sure to give me a hug. And it's like those types of relationships that I never had at church before. And so just having people that actually genuinely care about you, and not just that are just showing up just to check the box.
Yeah.
And, the church that I went to, there was a lot of prominent figures from the town. So it was, I dare to say that it was kind of more like a status symbol, type deal, and it carried over with their kids, and that's a lot of where we got the interactions with people from. And so the people that you would want to be close to, that you think are great or that are part of the church or whatever, were the ones that would dismiss you because you didn't wear name brand clothing or whatever else. And I just didn't get that vibe here at all. It was just, no matter what, everybody was just so welcoming, and everywhere there's always problems, but that was something I was going through with a totally fine-tooth comb, like trying to read every situation. I didn't give a lot of benefit of the doubt to different people, and so it was kind of like, in my mind, I was putting everybody through the ringer to establish whether or not I could trust and dive in, because we'd faced a lot of backlash growing up from trusting and letting people into our lives and telling them about the problems that we were going with. It's kind of it's very traumatizing when you're growing up through the church and you start telling people, getting vulnerable with people, and then all that information that you give out is the same things that they bring up in a public setting that's nobody else's business. And so all that was, I was not trusting at all with anybody. And so it had to develop. And
well, it sounds like too that really impacted your faith. I mean, we talk about it as if they're separate things, but so many times for people when they have really negative experiences at the church, that really interacts with their faith, with whether or not they close themselves off to continuing to walk with the Lord or whatever. And it sounds like it was somewhat the same with you, that those negative experiences impacted your faith. But you're also talking about but there was a nagging, and you didn't use that word, but there was a hunger, something just, I need more, need something. You're hungry for something. You're looking for something. And I think those welcoming relationships where you were starting to be able to trust kind of fed that hunger. And I know, I'm just thinking about my first interactions with you were really in kind of D school. I mean, we'd met and I knew who you were, and we'd chatted, but in D schools where I really got to know you. And that was we used to have a program where people would commit a whole year, 2 different semesters of 2.5 hours every Monday night, except for when Blake taught, and then it was like 30 minutes.
It was usually like a field trip and 30 minutes
that's right.
Teaching.
He always did the fun stuff. But the point was, it was a deep dive. And I remember you being in that class. Man, that hunger was obvious. So talk a little bit about, as you're obviously now getting to be part of the church and starting to feel safer in that environment, trusting a little bit, but also really hungry. I mean, so what's God doing in your life in terms of your relationship with Him as you're starting to get more involved here?
Yeah, well, and that going to that, there was a huge process to get to even that point. That you're talking about the going away and developing that hunger. There was a huge, it was 12, 13 years of no desire whatsoever to develop a relationship with God. I was totally astray. And then it had started building up. And so coming into D school, we're really a little before that, I'd actually gotten challenged by somebody. Growing up, I'd always thought that becoming a member of a church was just, I'm here, so I'm a member, right? So I didn't really know anything that carried on with that or whatnot. And I got challenged by somebody that just kind of asked me, why aren't you a member of the church? I was like, well, I am. It's like, but you're not. And so it really started challenging me big time. And so I really thought into it a lot more and started realizing what it meant to become a member. I'd never been baptized before. And so it's like all those different things had started packing in more and more. It's like, oh man, there's this desire here, there's that desire there. And so that's what, led me to become a member and get baptized. And then it was just, I couldn't stop there. Right. So that was where D School came in. And, Marie had a huge impact on me on, kind of what D School was, because she had gone through it before. And at the time we had just been friends and we were just kind of talking at that point and getting to know each other. And so we had talked about D School a lot. And, then whenever I went through that process, it was just starting to realize all these different things that, the process of sanctification was all these years of culminating into one. And it was in the moment, you don't ever know that it's actually happening until that's one thing that I got out of D School is afterward, you can look back and see, oh yeah, God was piquing me there. He was pulling me there. He was being consistently tugging at my heart here, or this is why I ended up in this position. And so, that really pulled in there, developing that relationship. So a little after D School ended, it was just a few months after D School ended, Marie and I ended up getting engaged. And so we started going through this book. It's by Francis and Lisa Chan. It's You and Me Forever, Marriage in Light of Eternity. And it just goes and talks about what a godly marriage is and how it's the ultimate goal of a godly marriage is to be an example, more or less. This is obviously paraphrasing, but be an example to those outside so they can get an idea of what the marriage with Christ will be like in the end. And so we just kind of dove into that and developing more of an understanding on that with our relationship. And, it just started getting me to ask some more questions. I participated in a few men's group Bible studies and book studies and stuff, both at the gym and with started to get a couple guys from work. Didn't last very long, but a couple of guys from work, we got together and we'd do stuff. And it was still like there was that relationship, the extremely close personal relationship with people, the community that I'd still been craving. So what ended up happening with that, what's pushed me even further is these community groups. We got in the community group. We're over at the Moody's, and there's several of us. Everybody has their kids and everything, and it's awesome to see. Right now we're doing a thing together where each week we're going through and giving each other's testimonies. So, we'll hear from this couple, their testimony. And then, previously we heard from somebody else and so on and so forth, and everybody's giving their testimony. So it's just kind of awesome to see a lot of us in the similar seasons of life with kids and same age kids relatively. And just hearing everybody's stories, because everybody's story is totally different. Yeah. And some of them are very similar. So just figuring out where God's moving in different people's lives and how he's impacted them has really, really affected my walk. And it's helping me to realize more that all these things that I've had happen to me, all the, stray away and everything that I had growing up is really helped me to connect with more people. Because with my job, I get a really unique opportunity to witness to people in some of the craziest settings that you can imagine. Back of a cop car in handcuffs is a pretty unique place to be witnessed to. And I don't do it intentionally to like try to tell them, oh, you need God in your life or whatever. But just one of the best quotes that I'd ever heard was, "You're always witnessing, and only about 10% of the time you use your words." Mm-hmm. And so having that type of interaction with people in those settings is it's just incredible, and seeing God work through those situations, and hearing stories from people about how something that I did or said, or even arrested somebody for whatever reason, how that's changed them. It's all just kind of made me more hungry to learn how I can help better, and how I can help, ultimately develop those relationships, and whatever kind of relationship, whatever kind of status that relationship is, how I can turn those into, hey man, why don't you come check out this church? Why don't you come dive in deeper, and just kind of getting more people involved in that.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about, so when you're talking about in D school, this realization that I think a lot of us sometimes is common to go through as you start to engage the Lord, as you start to really grow in your faith, that kind of these light bulb moments where you realize that some of the times in your life, you talked about reflecting back to these 12 or 13 years where you're very intentionally putting distance between you and God and you and church people. And, it was a very intentional shutdown, but that even in those moments, the discovery of the fact that God is at work, that he hasn't, and in some sense, when we abandon him, he doesn't abandon us. He doesn't take no for an answer. He continues to pursue. As you are looking back and realizing that, seeing God's hand even at work in times of rebellion, what is that? I mean, I imagine that's encouraging. I imagine that's a powerful thing to realize. What does that do for you in that moment to realize that in those years, oh my goodness, I can see the hand of God at work? How does that impact you moving forward?
Well, I mean, honestly, it's very humbling. I mean, I think that's a good word to use for that. So I'll kind of backtrack to that very first time that I went to the college ministry deal. The lesson was on Samson, and I never, prior to this point, I'd heard all the Bible stories somewhat, never really put it all together. And talking about Samson and how much he was able to, he did things, God used him in miraculous ways, even though he was just not a great person at all.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of the thing that I took away just from that moment was that, oh man, like all of these problems that I've had, all these years of just not being a good person, and definitely not being a good follower of Christ, he can still use me. And so it was just, it was a super, like a big gut punch, I think, at the moment, that it's just like, man, like, where are you living your life? Where are you putting your trust? And ultimately it was just extremely encouraging to know that, like, that no matter what I've been through, no matter what I've done or said, or even though I know I don't deserve, what it is, what I've gotten, I understand grace now. And there's just there's no way I can look back at that and say that this is not grace, God's grace in my life. And so it's definitely helped me to develop that understanding of God's grace.
Wow. Well, one of the things I've noticed about you in our conversations as we've become friends is I feel like you talk about the integration of your faith in your workaday world in like you see those as seamless. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like the way you talk about being a police officer, you talk about it as a platform for your faith and as an opportunity for your faith. I think most of us, certainly those of us that have never been in that world, we look into the law enforcement world and we go, wow, that's a hard place. That's a quote unquote secular job that would be really difficult. I mean, you're in tense and tough situations all the time. And I think there's a lot of people that are in these, again, quote unquote secular jobs that are going, how, I feel like there's a divide in my life where there's faith over here and then there's my workaday world over here, and they seem to kind of be oil and water a little bit. And I struggle to bring those into alignment. How have you done that? And how have you been able to allow your work world to really just be a platform for who God has called you to be, who God's created you to be, and as an opportunity to share the gospel. I feel like you really focus hard on that. What have you done to bring those two together?
I don't think it's anything that I've done. That's just it. Is I could go back to different stages in my life, and had I been put in this position, several years ago, it wouldn't have been the same. I would have fallen under the same, I guess, issues that everybody else does or deals with, and everything. So I don't think it's ever been anything I've done. To me, it's just it just happens. Like, it's a great way to take advantage of that opportunity, to get to speak to people and just really just show them what it's like. I think, see if I can put this into words even. It's kind of just, especially in this day and age with the way the view is on law enforcement, the way there's a lot of negative light on police officers and the way that there's interactions that don't go very well, and a lot of it comes from misunderstanding, people that don't really understand the full story of what's really going on. But it's also just a bunch of miscommunication, and so there's been a negative stigma about law enforcement for more than just this most recent. These most recent issues these last few years. So I remember coming into a lot of it. You get called names, you get called racist and all these bad things from people that aren't true. And I'd grown up my whole life hearing people say all these things about me that weren't true, but you start to believe the lies and stuff. Yeah. But this was like kind of one of those things. It's like, no, that's not true. I'm not going to believe that lie. You can say it all you want, but it's not true about me. And so I remember coming into a lot of this as being having the desire to help people to see what a good police officer was like, to help change people's ideas about what police officers were. And so I think that was, pre-D School, pre-Fredonia Hill, the drive for Christ. And that's one of those deals that I can look back and say that was absolutely God in my life without me doing anything. It was that's just the mindset that I had, that I wanted to help people to see, I'm a good person, that police officers are a good person. I wanted to change the public perception of the view of what I was doing for work. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of it just happened that way, really. It was all just natural flowing. Like I said, I don't feel like I did anything specifically. It's just, that's the idea that I had in my head, and it just stuck. And then now looking back, like I said, I can go back and see that was absolutely God's hand in all of that. Because I had that idea about how I wanted to interact with the public and how I wanted to get involved in people's lives before I started really pursuing Christ myself.
And so now it just becomes those interactions. People are interacting with you, and so the merger of faith and vocation is the fact that they're interacting with you. And who are you? Well, you're somebody that has been given new life in Christ. You're somebody that's been forgiven and redeemed and given grace and mercy. And so an interaction with you in your work world is somebody interacting with somebody that has experienced that change, that knows the Lord. And they then become the beneficiaries of interacting with somebody that knows about grace.
And the cool thing about that specifically is I remember a conversation actually with a supervisor of mine, and it was right there around D School. Actually, just soon. It was either during D School or right after D School ended. I had a conversation with one of my supervisors, and he kind of just looked me in the eyes like, Jessup, you're a really good dude. Said, I've noticed a huge change in you and the way that you present yourself, the way that you act, the way that you look. Obviously I didn't have any major physical changes, but just with different things, like somebody outside that I don't know their relationship with Christ or anything like that, but somebody from totally outside told me that they saw the difference in me, and that made all the world of difference. A world to me that somebody else noticed. somebody who I'd never had a conversation about Christ with. I'd never talked to him about my walk with God or my past or anything like that. But for them to sit there and pull me into the office, and during one of the conversations, that's what he told me. I was just like, wow, that's incredible.
And I imagine that sticks with you too.
Oh, absolutely.
As in, not only is it like, wow, it's evident,
Mm-hmm.
but also now as I go into the public, that's the kind of encounter that I'm praying that people have,
Mm-hmm.
is they have an encounter with somebody who's obviously different,
Mm-hmm.
and that they notice.
Yeah. I've had kind of like this goal of mine, with all the job and everything being tough, and you don't always make a difference in somebody's life, but I've had this goal, and it's the only goal that I have in the job. If I can make a difference in one person's life, if I can change one person's life, I've done my job. And so just having those types of interactions, having somebody acknowledge that, and for years growing up, I used to always have to, I always had to be, if I didn't get recognition for something, I sought recognition. I always needed the praise. I needed it to come to me, and very selfish and all that. And so coming here, it was it was the exact opposite. They didn't build you up. It was, tear down all the time. And so to go through that and realize that that was a problem that I had, where I was seeking the recognition for things. And then once I started changing my life and following God and being obedient, all these changes just start coming my way from outside that had nothing directly to do with the church. It was just outside things. My work started changing. I started getting different positions at work. I started just loving myself a lot more, loving life a lot more. And, ultimately I met my wife. So,
wow.
And it is just all that took place, just being obedient.
Man, that's amazing. I think sometimes, and maybe the spot to put a cap on it is, sometimes I think we way overthink the merger of those two things. We think about it in more complicated terms than it really needs to be. What Nathan's talking about is basically allowing the character of who God is making him into. As he is hungry for the Lord and he comes before the Lord is sanctifying him and changing him in ways that at the time sometimes you're not even realizing. Even in your darker moments, the Lord's sanctifying you, and it's in your work world, in your vocational life, allowing that character to come through. And you don't have to be a police officer. You don't have to have a public platform to do. I mean, anywhere we go, that's the reality of who we can be, is a demonstration of who God is and what he's done in our life. And that's a pretty amazing way to look at your work world. Pretty cool viewpoint. So, man, thanks for sharing that with us.
We'll say I'm a little bit disappointed y'all didn't ask me if I like sweet tea or coffee.
Well, let's settle that right now. What's your preference?
Let's shut it down right there.
Coffee all the way. Sorry, Blake.
I've
got my sweet tea over here, and I'm happy.
Or half and half tea. I do drink half and half, but not like crazy sweet.
I understand. I've had to.
I mean,
I'm
a cop. Yeah, like donuts and coffee. Like I fit that stereotype to a T.
So donuts as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so I got to ask you then. My favorite story. Have I told a story about? If I repeat a story, friends, I'm sorry.
There's too many episodes.
I have a good friend of mine, Brad Latson. He was actually one of the guys that I went and hung out with in Arkansas. So you've heard him on this podcast. His dad was a police officer in Denton. And so when we were growing up, that was his world and his dad. And he would always tell us stories. So we'd always hear these stories. And one of his favorite stories to tell is, his name's Greg Latson. So Brad, if you listen, send this to your dad. I hope I get this story right. But he used to have to work I-35, and he had a guy doing a ride along one time, and it's early in the morning, and he's got his cup of coffee. And I don't know if it's a mug or cup, but it's an open cup of coffee. And he's flying along down the interstate, and somebody on the other side of the interstate comes flying by, and like he's taking just a Sunday afternoon drive, he hits the median, like spins in the median, turns around, hits the lights, flies down the other side of the interstate going after this guy who's speeding. Never spills a drop of coffee. And he tells a story. His favorite part of the story to tell is that the guy in the ride along is just pinned in the corner of the car, like totally terrified, and he's just like never even spills coffee. So, what's your skill level in navigating coffee and all the other things you do?
I mean, it's actually part of the police academy during the driving.
You have to not spill coffee.
You have to drive around with a cup of coffee. No, actually, I've got a very, what is it? Is it geoscopic? Is that where you don't? I don't know what terms I'm looking for, but no, I'm very good at.
You're a pro.
Oh, I'm a pro. Talk on the radio. No, I drive with both hands on the wheel.
That's right, you do. That's right.
I never use my computer when I'm driving.
Well, that's good. We need some lessons because I watch people here at church like walk down the hall with their cup of coffee and it's sloshing everywhere, and I'm like, come on, people, come on.
Yeah, man, it only spills when somebody bumps into the arm, and then it's just like.
Oh, then
why'd you have to walk so close?
That's right.
COVID. No, I'm just kidding.
That's right.
6 feet.
Well, man, seriously, thanks for spending some time with us.
Me.
That's so great. If you got any feedback, anything that you heard in Nathan's story that you want to go, man, that really was helpful. That was encouraging. We obviously want to hear about that. If you've listened to other episodes where that's been the case, we want to hear about that. We've always said you can just tap us on the shoulder and tell us. You can write us a note. Good old handwritten note.
Yeah,
you can do that. Send it with a pigeon.
Telegraph, Morse code. We
accept all that.
Yeah, anything.
Or you can email us.
Email us at stc@FredoniaHill.org.
And we got more fun guests on the way. Thanks so much for listening. Don't forget, tell your friends about the podcast and earn your sticker. Adios.